and then I'll start sharing my screen and we'll go from there. A prayer, for those of you who are old enough or still remember Rite One, Prayers of the People. This was one of the petitions. Let us pray. Open, O Lord, the eyes of all people, to behold thy gracious hand in all thy works, that, rejoicing in thy whole creation, we may honor thee with their substance and be faithful stewards of their bounty. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
All right. If you would all do me a favor, it's best if you, I found it's best in these things if you mute yourself during the presentation, and put questions in the chat if you know how to do that. At the end, I'll take questions from that point on, and we'll go from there. So let me share my screen, and we'll get started. Presenting a budget so that people won't fall asleep. Well, let's see what we can come up with. A couple of things to start off with is there's a difference between finance and accounting. Finance is the 30,000-foot view. Accounting is the boots on the ground. There are general principles of accounting, but each accountant applies those or implements them differently. If you like being in the weeds, I would invite you to join the finance committee of the diocese or your own finance committee, because that's where you get into the weeds. And that'll be important when we talk about a little later on. So what is a budget? These are different ways that you can look at your budget. A budget is a battle plan. It's great until the first shot is fired. A budget is EWAG, an educated wild-ass guess. A budget can be viewed as a way to control expenses. A budget can be viewed as a way to track expenses. A budget does not necessarily reflect cash flow, how much money you actually have in the bank at any particular point in time. A budget ultimately is a reflection of the mission, vision, value, structure, strategy, structure, and tactics of a church, of an organization. Now, theoretically, mission, vision, and values will not change, but strategy, structure, and tactics are always changing wherever we go. An example of what this looks like is this. The mission of the church is to restore all people to unity with God and each other in Christ. That is, in essence, all of our missions, because it comes from the Book of Common Prayer, the Catechism, page 855. So St. Swithin's in the Swamp wants their vision is to restore people to unity with God through the use of music. And they value congregational singing. So their strategy is to hire a music director who will encourage, educate, and inspire people to sing. Structure, and this is where I'd say the real rub comes. Usually what we don't ever debate mission, vision, and values. What usually gets debated is strategy, structure, and tactics, the things of how to implement vision, values, and mission. The structure, the music director will have the final decision in all things music, which is would be a major change in the structure of most Episcopal churches, because the rector or priest in charge is technically in charge of all liturgy and music. However, the canons do say that a rector or priest can designate that authority someone else, but you have to be clear about what's going on there. So if you get a music director who wants to include this song or that song because it helps the congregation sing, which is one of your values, and the rector vetoes it, then you've short-circuited the system. And their tactic would be to develop a job description with the skills that you think that person needs, both musically and people. Now, how that affects the budget is that the largest line item in your budget would be music. And I think that is part of our problem when it comes to budget is that most parishes have not done the work on mission, vision, and values so that they know how they want to do that and how they want to budget. Their budget doesn't necessarily reflect that. And I'll talk in a few minutes about what I think should be in those budgets, but we'll go on from here. A budget is a presentation to the people at the annual parish meeting. A budget is also a presentation that is to be given at a budget report at vestry meetings. Remember that at the parish meeting, you are not presenting a budget to be approved, but you're presenting a budget for information and in some ways inspiration. You're trying to give people a vision of what their funds will go for in order to advance the mission, vision, and values of the parish. Do remember that you're giving them a 30,000-foot view. This is not a place to go into how much money you pay for water, gas, electricity, those kinds of things. It's not enough. It shouldn't be a place where you share information about how much the priest health insurance is, or the priest health savings, or whatever car allowance is. Do remember that your primary purpose, and I can't say this enough, your primary purpose in presenting the budget is to say thank you for the generosity of the parish. Parishes are the worst in the world about saying thank you to their donors. Most of the other organizations, if you give NPR money, they will send you a t-shirt or a cup. And half the time, we don't send thank you notes to the people who pledge. We don't make phone calls. We don't honor them. One of the parishes that I served many, many years ago would put up on the wall the names of the people who actually pledged, not their amounts, but the names of people with a big sign that said, thank you for supporting our mission. That is, you can't say thank you enough. People want to know this is what's going on. Do remember that you are setting a tone. The way you present the budget is a tone, and that is as important as the information that you're actually presenting. What are you communicating on the emotional level? And finally, do use your imagination. Now, the reality is that most treasurers and accountants are not known for their imagination. And this is where it would be helpful for you to seek out other people in the parish who do have ways, creative ways of presenting information. So that if we want to take anything from the internet positively these days, it would be that look at how they use information to make you click. What is known as clickbait. You read something and people click on it, then you want to click on it. The same thing in some ways is what you want to do in the parish when you present your budget, which is to entice them, encourage them, inspire them to click more, find out more, so that they see that, let's say that 30% of your budget goes to outreach, or the big portion of your budget goes to the music program. You want them to then kind of explore what that means. What does that look like? What are we doing? So use your imagination. Here are some don'ts. And I should pause at this point and say, I'm saying this is what I'm giving you all is the perfect way to present a budget. Not that it'll always occur that way, or that people will always do it this way. And you may not agree with everything I say, but I want you to think about it. So some don'ts. Don't give them the QuickBooks printout. One of the worst travesties that has been inflicted on the church is QuickBooks. Because when you give QuickBooks, you're giving an accounting view, not a finance view of the budget. And yes, this means you will have to take figures from QuickBooks, import them into maybe an Excel spreadsheet, a PowerPoint presentation, however it is that you want to do, but you don't want to give them the printout that you get from QuickBooks. Most people don't know how to do that. And in particular, one of the things that I always find with people, especially with vestries and other people, when they're looking at an accounting book worksheet, when they see a negative number, that means something's wrong. However, in QuickBooks, that is usually a positive because it means you've taken in more money for this event than you actually budgeted for this event. So it communicates the wrong message. And you want to communicate positivity, and you want to communicate hope, and you want to inspire. Don't, as I said, don't be negative. Oh no, we don't need a bunch of Eeyores at that. And this is how much we don't have. Talk about what we do have and what we have accomplished. You don't, in some ways, you don't have to tell people what you're not doing, and you don't have to tell them the negative news. To a degree, you have to be realistic about your presentation, but you don't have to say that the church is going to close tomorrow kind of thing when you don't know that, because the budget is just a guide. It doesn't mean, in some ways, it doesn't mean anything until you live through the budget, through the year. You don't know. Nobody who planned a budget for 2020 expected a pandemic to hit in March. Nobody did. So the budget went out the door in some ways. And if you've been in one of my other seminars, you will know that the diocese is doing what is called a rolling budget, which is every 3 months, we're going to look at our figures and readjust line items based on what is the trend. I recommend a 3-month or a quarterly kind of approach for the simple fact that gives you a good indication of trends. Monthly, weekly, those kinds of things. So many church treasurers and accountants look at the weekly income, and if it's not matching what they budgeted, then they get nervous, or the monthly doesn't match what happens. And given the mail these days, I can tell you that I got some assessments from 2020 this week. And so it makes us look like our budget for 2020 was terrible with regard to assessment income. But the reality is we're doing okay right now. And finally, do not forget to say thank you. I can't emphasize that enough. We need to say thank you over and over again. Some suggestions for how to present this budget. One is to have a separate meeting for those who want to dig in the details. I have yet to be in a parish where there is not one person who raises their hand and wants to know how much money we're spending on phone bills.
Okay.
And they don't want to, let me see if I can get rid of that. There we go. Oops. They want to dig into the budget and the figures, and that's okay. We don't mind being transparent. What I suggest is that at the beginning of your meetings, and you do this before you get to the annual parish meeting, but at the beginning of the meeting, say, I am presenting a 30,000-foot view of the budget, the big picture. How much money we think we're going to take in, how much money we think we're going to expend, and these are the expenses that we're going to have. If you would like information about the details of the budget, meet me afterwards in the church, in classroom or in the sanctuary or in the parish hall or whatever, and I'll be glad to give you whatever it is you want to talk about. I've done that in a number of parishes of my own, and it has helped the meetings, and it has given the people that needed that. Usually that meeting is very, very small because most people trust that the vestry, the finance committee, the treasurer, the rector have spent due diligence. If they don't trust you, then that's another issue that you need to talk with Peggy about that, about how you can build some trust in order to present a budget. Tell how you made a difference in people's lives and in your community. And that's My cursor. It's lost on my screen because I have the video down here I was going to show you before. What's going on here? Sorry, technical difficulties. I'll show you in a minute. I'll show the video in a minute. Use stories, use pictures, use videos. There's nothing that says that your budget has to be presented in just numbers and lines of numbers. Most people don't know how to read those things, even when they do, even when you do that kind of thing. So kind of do that. Tell stories. Say thank you. Use pictures of how you reached out into the community. And I'm going to try and see if I can get my cursor back. Do this. Maybe I can. I've lost my cursor on my screen, so that's not helpful. There it is. Okay, let's go back. I'll share my screen once again and show you an example of a video that I think is something that you can show out.
Whenever you're ready, Shirley.
Okay, this is a note for everybody that lives in Wisconsin. You need 3 good things. You need a good snow shovel, a good battery in your car, and you need a good furnace. And everything else will fall in place. But above all those 3, you need a good priest to come to your home and give you communion. And we praise him for that. Thank you.
That's an example of how you could share. Okay, people want to know, what does a priest do? How does it make a difference in people's lives? Here's a picture of, and always make sure you get pictures of a donation given by Holy Communion to Side by Side. You can show a picture of how you, pictures of
Whenever
people.
you're ready, Shirley.
Darn it. Pictures of people who have done things like sewing pillowcases. Those are all the different, those communicate and tell what your money has gone for all those things. You can also tell stories. This is a story told about one of our parishioners who reached out to another parishioner, and we got a note that said, I needed a saint. You are one. Thank you. What a swift and efficient help. Like, I can't believe. Thanks to one and all. I'm very grateful. It tells you what your people are doing to make a difference in the people's lives in the church. This is what your money goes for. And these are the kinds of things you're wanting to look to help out, to communicate to the people. This is a kind of a sample report of a budget. This happens to be the diocesan budget from a few years ago, but you see how simple it is. Income, expenses, and how we look, and notes about why off to the side. Why was this done this way? Why was that? Why is this so different than what we thought it would be? That's the kind of budget, simple one-page budget reports that you need to give people when you're trying to give them a budget. Simplicity is better than complexity. I don't necessarily, you can have all the information available to you and right there, but you don't have to share it. The best example or metaphor I can give you of that is one that I did a number of years ago, that I always tell people is, when you prepare a cake for someone's birthday, you don't bring the mixing bowls, the measuring cups, the spatula, the blender, and all of that to the table. What do you bring to the table? The cake. And you present that, you present the finished product. And that's kind of what you should be presenting on a budget. And I think the reality is that sometimes we care about the details. We want to know. There's some of us who love that kind of stuff, but that's not the majority of the people there. And that's not what you're trying to communicate to them. You're trying to communicate to them that your parish has lived up to its mission, vision, and values by spending their money as donors. They've given you money, they've entrusted money for you to do the mission, and you have spent it in ways that have concretely, specifically made differences in people's lives. And I think that is, if I can't say, if you don't hear anything else I've said or don't agree with anything else you've heard me say, there are two things you should take away from what I've said up to this point. One is you can't say thank you enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your address to the congregation when you present your budget should begin with thank you, have thank you in the middle a number of times to specific people, if that's appropriate, specific campaigns that went that way, and end again by saying thank you for your generosity. And second of all, simple, simple, simple. Not too much information. We think that that's being transparent. That's not being transparent. That's being confusing. And like I said, if you have people who want to dig into the numbers, that's where you invite them to a separate meeting and let them dig into those numbers. I'm going to stop talking here at this point and see if anybody has any questions, comments, anything. If you do, unmute yourself and speak, or just if you want to disagree with me, that's fine. I'm open to all of that. Or thoughts. Did I make any sense, actually? You know, that's always my question. Did I make any sense?
A few years ago, I went to a one-page budget handout for the annual meeting. And I think that's gone over well for the congregants, because it was getting too much into the weeds having each line item. So I've gone to one page with the broad categories, and I think that's worked out well.
In case you don't know, that's Mike Weber, our diocesan treasurer. So it's nice to know we're on the same page. Questions, comments? Peggy, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say what I really appreciated about the presentation, and I've seen it twice now, and it's much better tonight. So a lot of detail, but I liked the way that a budget should express what the church is about. And so often we just get into doing our jobs, and so we forget about that. It really should be showing our mission. And I liked how pictures and stories and things about that, it just gives you another way to connect with people. And I think for you to remember when you're presenting budgets or information, so if we've got treasurers, there will be people that will listen to the numbers and they want that. And then there are going to be other people that'll really listen to the stories and the pictures and say, man, that's so great. I didn't realize that we did that. And it just brings joy back into, like, this is what it means to be a church. This is what it means to be a parish. And so I really hope that together the vestry will think about that and give that information. So thank you, Kevin, for presenting it like that.
Are there any suggestions for doing the budget presentation via Zoom that people should think about?
Yes. I mean, good point. Good question, Mike. Thank you for asking. I should have included that in my presentation, but given that probably many of the annual parish meetings will be on Zoom this year, it is a wonderful way to show pictures and videos, numbers. I see this in the comments that someone couldn't read the screen. So it's going to be hard to see numbers on a screen. And if you throw up a lot of numbers, it can get really confusing and it's hard to make out. So, you know, and the idea that most people talk about with PowerPoint or visual presentations is 1 point per slide. If you'll notice in my presentation, I had all the do's on one and all the don'ts on another, rather than trying to put them on one slide together. So again, you could throw up a picture of like the one I'm going to use this year that we're going to use at Holy Communion, by the way, Randy, is the one of the side by side where we gave them a check and we're going to say outreach to the community, $2,000. So they see the figure, but they also see where that went and how it went. So it gives them something concrete to leave on. And so, but that would be one slide. And then you can show a picture of the, of your priest and put out the priest compensation on that side. Or if you had some pictures from pre-COVID where people in the altar guild doing their jobs, liturgic, altar guild supplies, and that number with a picture. Also, I think personal testimonies, ask a member of the altar guild, an acolyte, a lay reader, a Eucharistic minister, a member of the vestry to give a 10 or 15-second video about what is important about this and how the support of the church, what that support of the church has meant to them to be able to allow them to do that. I mean, I'm reaching at this point, but, if the church provides acolyte robes for the lay Eucharistic or for Eucharistic ministers and acolytes, we know that some of our parishioners probably couldn't afford to buy their own. So you show a picture of this allows this person to be a part of our ministry, and it's not based on how much money they give or have.
And I'll just add in with that, Kevin, because I was with another clergy group talking about a variety of things. And when you brainstorm and have a whole bunch of ideas, people sometimes think, oh my gosh, I can't possibly do all of those. Kevin's just giving you a bunch of ideas. So if you could do one, so if there's one picture, there's one story. If you haven't done this before, we understand that it takes time. And we understand a lot of this is new, but you have a new medium where you can use some graphics and some pictures. And so if you could just do one, or to think about how you did this stewardship, just to kind of bring that back. When we think about stewardship piece of it, it is showing the people what the finances can bring, what they do cover, and thanking people, thanking what we're doing, that we have this opportunity, what we've learned. So it's just, we don't want you to think that just because we list 10 different things that you should be doing. There's no shoulds. It's just suggestions that here's some ideas. And sometimes when you hear something, you'll think of something and then you can tell us. And that's what we're hoping, that somebody will say, hey, we've got an idea.
Right. Yeah. Don't feel like you have to do everything that I've suggested. I've given you all of those kinds of things. Kathy, the question in the chat is, any suggestions about how to include teens and young adults in this conversation? Can you give me a little more information? How do you, because you could call the teens to help you put together the whole PowerPoint. They do it on a regular basis and they're pretty good at it. But what are you trying to get them involved in?
I'm just thinking about the annual meeting generally, but also just seeing them as full. Usually they're confirmed already. They're full members of the church and they need to be treated as such. Right. So I wondered if people have ways they're doing that.
Good question. I'll let everyone take a moment to think about it. I'll tell you what I have done in the past with parishes with young people is that you really do need to get them not by themselves, but in their own group, and tailor the conversation to them and ask them questions. The younger generation in particular wants to dialogue. And so I would go into a conversation, I would gather teams together and talk to them about and ask them questions about, what do you think is a whole lot of money? And, do you carry cash? How do you spend your money? And what does it look like for you to spend your money that way? And what kinds of things do you spend it on? and allowing them to kind of share their thoughts about, and asking them, what do you think the church should be spending its money on? And then you can ask questions like, we all want, the greatest thing that would ever happen is that the offering plates were passed on Sunday mornings. They were brought to the altar, and the priest held them up, and they ascended into heaven, and God took them and used them to feed the poor and the homeless. The reality is that money comes forward, it goes away, gets counted, and pays for toilet paper and light bulbs. And helping them understand that that's part of our being able to do ministry, is that we have to pay for the light bulbs and the toilet paper. I hope that's helpful, Kathy. Anyone else have any other ideas? Questions, thoughts, suggestions?
I believe that, especially during these Zoom times, that it would be a good idea to send out financial trying to present for the annual meeting, give people time to look it over and form any questions they might want to have, so that they can participate
Sure.
during the meeting and be prepared to do so. I think that's very helpful. And the other idea of putting everything on one page is fantastic. I've always done that with my in all my business career, and it makes a huge difference. You don't want people flipping pages. If there's a lot of detail, you can boil it down to categories as you had suggested, and then talk about the categories. I usually start off not only thanking people, but saying what a miracle has happened this past year, because it's every year since I've been treasurer since 2004 at Holy Cross. We've exceeded our expectations, whether there's a deficit budget, whether surplus. And we always seem to meet the budget and make all of our obligations, and still have lots of money for outreach. And we do emphasize that. Kind of got all of the different aspects of the rector's compensation, total rector compensation. So that's usually a top question for all, because usually it's the biggest part of the budget, especially the small parishes. And and if people could see exactly where all the money is going and what the total is, that makes a big difference, answers a lot of questions, and people usually are in agreement with what you've done.
Great. Thank you, Tom. That's wonderful. I think you're right. That's a great way to approach it.
Well, I would just add, and listening to Tom and how to simplify that, and you raised that issue. I think that one thing that treasurers and vestries have to realize is that this is your opportunity to really set the stage, to set how we're going to be. This is our, this is what's happening. This is, like you were saying, this is our budget. This is our template of where we're going. And not to forget about it for the rest of the year. I mean, your job then is to continually throughout this time let people know how you're doing, and so you can do that because oftentimes, since my other role in congregational development and transition, I will get
we do that.
Some problems.
We do let the people know how we're doing, and
exactly.
Also, like Father Huddleston said, you have to roll with the changes of needs of the parish from year to year. And that's one good thing, I mean, that I've been able to do because I've been treasurer for so long, is to realize that as the details of our mission change, for instance, as we were so long without parish priests, but if we encouraged the people to continue with all their pledging, even though we didn't have priests, we had supply priests, and we were building our balance sheet so that we could afford to explore opportunities with a full-time priest by being able to fund a deficit from the balance. And now that we have one and the income is getting better, say, okay, some of the needs have changed. We have to do outreach. We have to do evangelism,
Mhm.
and the budget has to reflect that. And I think our parish has really understood all of those
Mhm,
things and those changes and the reason.
mhm. I think
Yep.
that's true. And to be able to look at that budget, that's why when you're letting people know how things are going, money's coming in, simplify it. Sometimes you may just do a chart as well, like here's the income, here are general expenses. If you're bringing people along, then if there is an issue, if you do have some financial problems, that money's not coming in, or you have extra expenses, let them know. There have been many times parishes have decided that we'll just be quiet, we won't say anything. That's the worst thing. What you're trying to do is make sure that the finances are transparent, that you are sharing the information. This is where we thought, this is what we were started off. Now we're 6 months in at this issue. Our both of our furnaces went out.
Yeah.
Well, you need to talk about that.
Well, again, going back to the budget for a second, the one-page format is really good if you can put the actual for the year you just finished and the budget for the new year, and show the budget from the previous year, so that you can see, that people can see changes in why we're making. That helps in the explanation.
Yeah.
Other point is, during the course of the year, I'm the paying, I do all the paying side as well as all the administrative stuff, but we have a receiving treasurer. And we watch very carefully during the course of the year how the pledges are coming in, how the pledge payments are coming in. And it's important to follow that rather than panic towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
So we watch our income every month, what is planned versus, or what the pledgees have said that they're going to pledge. And if something really starts to get out of line, we question, why is that happening with this person, these people? Because they normally perform. Is something wrong in their family? Does something need to help them? Or do we have to remind them because we, and that's very helpful to know, that you can predict what's going to happen in terms of income during the course of the year.
Right. I think your point, Tom, is really well made about keeping and Peggy's too, about keeping the parish informed all year round about how you're doing. Many parishes, the vestry knows, but they don't necessarily communicate it to the parish. And I learned this many, many years ago under the first rector I served. I was in a large parish, and our income was not matching our expenses, and he had the brilliant idea of, most of the time when that happens, the vestry makes decisions to cut programs, or to cut a salary, or to not do outreach, or delay their assessment period, and the parish never knows it, never sees it. Bob, in this case, thought that the parish needed to know that their lack of giving had an impact on the church. So he did the unthinkable thing of getting rid of all the coffee for all the meetings and Sunday mornings. People noticed. And when they asked why is there no more coffee, then we all had our talking points, but it was to say, well, our income is not as what we expected it to be, and therefore we've had to make some adjustments in our expenditures. Guess what? By the end of the year, we were over budget. But I think that's sometimes a mistake we make of trying to keep it too much in and saying this does affect us, kind of thing.
Well, sometimes if there are some critical items on the expense side, that even, of course, even during Zoom, when we have Zoom services, you can still do this whether you're in person or not at the church service. You say we're having a problem with this. Is there anyone that would be interested in throwing some extra money and go ahead and do it for that specific purpose? And we do have non-operational funds that we use for various projects. And if they start to get out of line, then we say, hey, these expenses are becoming more than the income, and we don't want to cut the outreach that we're doing for this particular project.
Right.
And you should see where the money comes from unexpected places all the time. It's amazing.
It does.
Even in small parishes.
Yep, it does. I want to make sure that everyone else has an opportunity to ask questions or speak up or raise something. Is there anybody who has a particular question they would like to ask? I mean, you're more than welcome to ask a question about the diocesan finances as well, or budget at this point, if you would like. Any other questions?
I have a comment about the diocesan budget. There's a lot of money that's being spent in the Milwaukee area by the diocese for the various outreach programs. Somehow that to me, that does not sound real fair to all of the smaller parishes that are in the other parts of the diocese.
Well,
Milwaukee and Madison are very blessed with the income that they have and how they use the money. But I could see the Milwaukee churches doing what the churches do in Madison. The diocese spend all that money, and some of the ways that churches grow is to
Tom, I want to interrupt you. Tom, I want to interrupt you there and make a correction. The diocesan budget does have an expense for outreach in clergy collars. What is it?
Collars on the corner.
Collars on the corner. Thank you. I couldn't remember.
And also Racine.
Well, both of those, yes, and the St. and the Hospitality Center, but both of those accounts come from a designated account.
I know that. I was on the board of trustees.
Yeah, so it's not really diocesan money. It's restricted money. We can't spend it any other way.
Except that the endowment from that trust says that that the diocese can be used as it's needed. And
not for the two accounts that we have that we use for Hospitality Center and for the collars on the corner. And I'd be glad to talk with you about that offline, but I want to keep us focused on the budget item at this budget presentation at this point.
I was just saying, just the Meacham funds, I know that you're talking about, but
no, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, but what I'm saying, some of those funds could be used to help the smaller parishes with their outreach programs to help build their evangelism, because that's one reason churches are so successful is that they're able to expand by reaching out into their communities and with community action.
Tom, if you come to me with a great plan that shows, we'll be glad to send that through the process. But the truth is, the money you were referring to is designated for those specific causes. And
By
so,
the
and
executive committee. Because
yeah,
I know what the HM Fund Trust says. It's more general than that. It's really up to the budget. It's really up to the executive committee on how that money is to be allocated on an ongoing basis.
Tom, I invite you to become a part of the finance committee to do that,
Okay.
to help decide that. I'd be welcome you to that.
Okay.
Okay. Judy asked if the parishes whether the diocese will give a month of forgiveness of assessments this year. That is a question that the finance committee is looking at, and we will look at it and make a recommendation to the executive council. Officially, only the executive council can make that decision at this particular point in time, but we're waiting to see how parishes are doing, to see how the vaccine rolls out, see what's going forward, to see whether that can be a possibility as well. But it's should I say it's under consideration, but there's nothing, I don't know that I can't promise you anything this year.
Yeah, I would say that. I would echo that. And I would say that for parishes that are that are struggling is to contact either Kevin or myself, and we'll keep you updated. And at least then we know. I've talked to some churches, the various groups that we're a part of. Some are doing fine. Some are okay. Actually, they've got some surpluses and others aren't. And a lot of it is contextual. There are so many different issues. And I was on a call today with people across the country, and we're not alone. I mean, that is what's going on. And so there is no one model will fit all. So talk with us. I mean, let us know what is going on. And as Kevin said, it is in conversation and it is up to the executive council. We are trying to hold some monies to make sure that we have some emergency funds should people need that. But that's what we have.
Mike, you can jump in here with me too, but the finance committee has made a proposal to the executive committee about having some funds reserved for operating costs.
Right. We've have a proposal for the executive committee that will give us parishes that are in need of assistance, especially because of COVID, some money to, as a loan. So that is a possibility for parishes that are struggling.
Kevin, did you see the question about the pension?
Yes, Tom, I'll answer the question. We can apply for a pension deferment. There is no pension forgiveness per se. You can delay pension payments of your clergy person for up to 4 months, but you still have to pay those at a future date. So I want to make sure you understand that it's a deferment, not a forgiveness. And that's a key factor for some parishes in their decisions making with regard to that. All right. Any other questions?
Kevin, can I just ask really quickly? This is Judy Hart.
Yes.
We got a nice explanation and summary about the PPP on our email for this meeting. And I'm trying to remember now without looking at the email, who would be a point of contact to discuss that?
That would be me.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just email me or call me, I will talk with you about it. I will give you my 2 cents worth, and it's worth as much money as you're paying me right now for this call, that you had to pay to get on this call, which is that the second round of PPPs are truly loans. There is not, and it will have to be probably paid back There is a chance at some point that they will be forgiven like the first PPP loans. But if I had to bet on it, I would bet that they're not going to make them grants. I could be wrong. I mean, I was wrong once, but I was mistaken. But anyway, I think that I just want parishes to be aware that it is a loan, not a grant.
Oh, what Congress passed was not a grant, but loans as opposed to what the Federal Reserve is doing, or the SBA.
Yes, those are loans.
Yeah,
So the legislation does not,
Well, there has to be further legislation to turn them into grants, is
Well,
my understanding at this point.
Kevin,
I
that's
mean,
helpful.
just so everybody knows that you can also talk to your CPAs about it if you have that ability to do.
Right.
They're really tuned in on it.
Judy?
Yeah, Kevin, I was just going to say that's very helpful because unfortunately, it was discussed by us about whether we should do that. And the thought was that back on the first one,
Yes.
and the impression was that it was not a good idea and that it wasn't highly thought of and that it wasn't probably something that, I don't think actually the diocese word was used, but that was frowned upon. And then I saw the most recent information and thought, we missed our chance. So I think you answered my question. It's unfortunate, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can make we wanted parishes with the first PPP loan to know that it was a loan, not forgiveness. And we wanted people to be serious. I mean, we didn't know the extent and how long all of this would go on. We made a judgment call at that time, and it may have been a poor one or not the best one, but given the information we had at that particular time. And again, this time, I will say the same thing again. I think it's up to each individual parish to decide whether they need it. And also just remember that it's a loan, not a grant.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because it has to be forgiven. There are things that you have to abide by to have it forgiven. And next week, when we do the PROCA report, that actually is coming up. That's one of the changes with that. Did you get the PPP loan? Where do you put that on the PROCA report? How is that being counted? So, and has it been forgiven? So there are a lot of little things with that.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? If not, I will just say thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I'm glad that you all joined us. I hope that we gave you some things to think about. I will reiterate again what Peggy said earlier. If you just one of these ideas, that would be great. Don't feel like you have to do all of them at this particular point in time and for your next parish meeting, but just keep in mind and think about creative ways in which you can share the numbers with people. Numbers don't mean anything unless there's a story behind them or it applies to people in a specific situation.
Right.
So.
Well, let me just, before we go, so next week at 7 o'clock, we are going to talk about the PROCA report, and Sarah will be sending out the notes and slides from this presentation. And with that, she'll also send out some information. If you've never filled out a PROCA report, make sure you open it and look at it before the 21st, and some instructions. So there are some changes, but you kind of need to know what it's about. And most of you, I know, have probably filled it out, but a few people haven't. And so we'll want to talk about some of the things that are different. Also, from this conversation, some of the things you talked about, I hope the next sessions that we have, and on February 18th, we're going to talk about fundraising. And how do you fundraise in a pandemic? How do you do that for your own budget? How do you do that for a cause? We've had a lot of successes with people. And so they're going to share their story. So you're going to hear from other parishioners and leaders how we're doing that. And then we are going to have trustees of funds and endowment. Jill Heller will be here to explain some of these things that we've touched on a little bit about endowments and planned giving and that'll be on March 11th. So we'll have all that written down for you.
Is that when you're going to talk about the parochial report? Or
Parochial
is
report is next week.
that, by the 21st?
Mhm.
Yeah, 21st.
So you'll get that information probably tomorrow.
And Sarah will send out the slides that I used for tonight to you all as well, so that you'll have copies of those.
I sure will.
And remember, always check out the website, because there's a resource page for you all. So we put everything there. And every day we're getting more things. So trying to decide what to put on there, but there's more than enough for you to take a look at.
Well, peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to
Thank you,
God.
God.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a
Thank
blessed
you.
evening.
Toodles.